The National Electrical Code, specifically Section 300.3c, addresses the requirements for the removal of abandoned cable. Understanding this section is crucial for electrical safety and compliance. Abandoned cable refers to installed cable that is not terminated at equipment other than a connection point and not identified for future use with a tag. This means that if a cable is no longer in service and is not intended to be used again, it must be removed. The NEC mandates this removal for several important reasons. Firstly, abandoned cables can contribute to fire hazards. While many modern cables are fire-resistant, they are not entirely fireproof. In the event of a fire, the insulation on abandoned cables can burn, producing smoke and potentially spreading the fire. The accumulation of abandoned cables increases the amount of combustible material present in a building, thereby increasing the fire load. Secondly, abandoned cables can create a significant safety risk for workers. Identifying active cables amidst a tangled mess of abandoned ones can be challenging. Workers may inadvertently cut or damage live cables, leading to electrical shocks or other injuries. Removing abandoned cables simplifies the wiring system and reduces the risk of accidental contact with energized conductors. Thirdly, abandoned cables can impede airflow in cable trays and pathways. Over time, the accumulation of these unused cables can restrict the circulation of air, potentially causing overheating of active cables and equipment. Proper airflow is essential for maintaining the operating temperature of electrical components and preventing premature failure. Fourthly, abandoned cables can create confusion and make troubleshooting more difficult. When technicians are trying to diagnose problems or make repairs, a jumble of active and abandoned cables can make it difficult to trace circuits and identify the source of the issue. Removing the unused cables simplifies the system and makes it easier to maintain. The NEC requirement for abandoned cable removal applies to various types of cables, including communication cables, data cables, and low-voltage power cables. It is important to note that the specific requirements may vary depending on the type of cable and the occupancy of the building. The process of removing abandoned cable typically involves several steps. Firstly, identify the cables that are no longer in use. This may require tracing the cables back to their origin and verifying that they are not connected to any active equipment. Secondly, disconnect the cables from any termination points. This should be done carefully to avoid damaging any surrounding equipment or wiring. Thirdly, remove the cables from the cable trays, conduits, or other pathways. Take care not to damage any other cables or components during this process. Fourthly, properly dispose of the removed cables. Many types of cable can be recycled, so it is important to check with local recycling centers to see if they accept cable for recycling. In some cases, it may be necessary to hire a professional electrical contractor to remove abandoned cables. This is particularly true if the cables are located in difficult-to-reach areas or if there is a large quantity of cable to be removed. Electrical contractors have the experience and equipment necessary to safely and efficiently remove abandoned cables. When removing abandoned cable, it is important to follow all applicable safety precautions. Firstly, to energize any circuits that may be affected by the removal process. Secondly, wear appropriate personal protective equipment, such as gloves and safety glasses. Thirdly, use caution when working in confined spaces or near other electrical equipment. Fourthly, properly label any remaining cables to avoid confusion in the future. The NEC requirement for abandoned cable removal is an important part of maintaining a safe and efficient electrical system. By removing unused cables, you can reduce fire hazards, protect workers, improve airflow, and simplify troubleshooting. Always follow the NEC guidelines and consult with a qualified electrical contractor if you have any questions or concerns. Section 300.3c is a critical aspect of electrical safety, mandating the removal of abandoned cables to mitigate fire risks, reduce worker hazards, improve airflow, and simplify troubleshooting. The requirement applies broadly to communication, data, and low-voltage power cables, necessitating a systematic approach. This approach includes firstly identifying unused cables by tracing them back to their origin and confirming their disconnection from active equipment. Secondly, disconnecting cables carefully from termination points to avoid damage to surrounding components. Thirdly, physically removing the cables from pathways such as cable trays and conduits. Fourthly, disposing of the removed cables responsibly, with recycling as a preferred option. Engaging professional electrical contractors may be necessary for complex removals, especially in challenging environments or with large cable quantities. Safety precautions are paramount during the removal process. Firstly, de-energizing affected circuits. Secondly, wearing appropriate protective gear, including gloves and safety glasses. Thirdly, exercising caution in confined spaces or near other electrical equipment. Fourthly, labeling remaining cables clearly to prevent future confusion. Adhering to Section 300.3c of the NEC ensures a safer, more efficient electrical system, reducing fire hazards, enhancing worker safety, improving airflow, and simplifying maintenance. For any uncertainties or concerns, consulting with a qualified electrical contractor is always advisable to ensure compliance and safety. Consider a scenario where a building undergoes renovations and new communication cables are installed. The old cables, no longer in use, become abandoned. Without adhering to NEC Section 300.3c, these abandoned cables remain in place, posing several risks. Firstly, they contribute to the building's fire load. If a fire were to occur, the insulation on these cables could ignite, releasing smoke and potentially spreading the flames more rapidly. Secondly, electrical workers performing maintenance or repairs in the future might mistake these abandoned cables for active ones, leading to accidental cuts or damage, causing potential electrical shocks or system disruptions. Thirdly, the accumulation of abandoned cables restricts airflow within cable trays and pathways, potentially leading to overheating of active cables and equipment, reducing their lifespan and increasing the risk of failure. Fourthly, troubleshooting becomes significantly more complex. Identifying the correct cables for diagnostics and repairs in a maze of abandoned cables is time-consuming and increases the likelihood of errors. By adhering to Section 300.3c and removing these abandoned cables, the building owner mitigates these risks. The removal process involves firstly identifying all abandoned cables, carefully tracing them to ensure they are not connected and are indeed unused. Secondly, disconnecting the cables from any termination points, taking care not to damage any surrounding equipment. Thirdly, physically removing the cables from their pathways, ensuring no other active cables are disturbed. Fourthly, properly disposing of the removed cables, seeking recycling options whenever possible. In some cases, the building owner may choose to hire a qualified electrical contractor to perform this task, especially if the removal is complex or involves a large quantity of cables. The contractor will ensure the work is done safely and in compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. Following the removal, the building's electrical system is safer, more efficient, and easier to maintain. The risk of fire is reduced, the safety of electrical workers is enhanced, airflow is improved, and troubleshooting is simplified. The building owner demonstrates a commitment to safety and compliance with the NEC, protecting both occupants and property. The key takeaway is that Section 300.3c of the NEC is not merely a suggestion but a requirement designed to ensure the safety and efficiency of electrical systems. Ignoring this requirement can have serious consequences, while adhering to it provides significant benefits. Always consult with a qualified electrical professional to ensure full compliance and to address any specific concerns or questions. Let's delve deeper into the specifics of how one might identify abandoned cables in a practical setting. Imagine a large office building undergoing a network upgrade. The IT department has installed new Cat6 cables, rendering the older Cat4v cables obsolete. These older cables are now considered abandoned. Firstly, a thorough visual inspection of all cable pathways, including cable trays, conduits, and sealing spaces, is necessary. Look for cables that are not connected to any active equipment at either end. Often, these cables will simply be hanging loose or coiled up in a corner. Secondly, use a cable tracer or turner to trace the cables back to their origin. A cable tracer consists of two parts, a tone generator and a probe. The tone generator is connected to one end of the cable, and the probe is used to follow the signal along the cable's path. If the cable leads to nowhere or to disconnected equipment, it is likely abandoned. Thirdly, consult with the IT department or the building's maintenance staff to obtain documentation of the cable layout. This documentation should indicate which cables are active and which are no longer in use. However, keep in mind that documentation may not always be accurate, so it is important to verify the information through visual inspection and cable tracing. Fourthly, look for cables that are damaged, frayed, or have deteriorated insulation. These cables are not only likely abandoned, but also pose a safety hazard. They should be removed immediately, regardless of whether they are connected to any equipment. Once a cable has been identified as abandoned, it is important to properly disconnect it and remove it from its pathway. Firstly, to energize the circuit if the cable is a power cable. This can be done by turning off the circuit breaker that supplies power to the cable. Secondly, use appropriate tools to disconnect the cable from any termination points. This may involve unscrewing connectors, cutting wires, or removing staples. Thirdly, carefully remove the cable from the cable tray, conduit, or sealing space. Avoid pulling on the cable too hard, as this could damage other cables or equipment. Fourthly, properly dispose of the removed cable. Many types of cable can be recycled, so it is important to check with local recycling centers to see if they accept cable for recycling. If recycling is not an option, the cable should be disposed of in accordance with local regulations. Remember that safety should always be the top priority when working with electrical cables. If you are not comfortable performing any of these tasks, it is best to hire a qualified electrical contractor. They have the training, experience, and equipment necessary to safely and efficiently remove abandoned cables. By following these steps, you can ensure that your building's electrical system is safe, efficient, and compliant with the National Electrical Code. Moreover, consistent review and updates to cable layout documentation are essential to avoid future cable abandonment issues. This proactive approach saves time and resources in the long run, ensuring that the electrical and communication infrastructure remains well organized and easily maintainable. In addition to the practical steps for identifying and removing abandoned cables, let's consider the long-term benefits of adhering to NEC Section 300.3c from a facility management perspective. Firstly, compliance with the NEC reduces the risk of liability. If a fire or injury occurs due to abandoned cables, the building owner or manager could be held liable for damages. By removing abandoned cables, you are taking a proactive step to protect yourself from potential legal action. Secondly, a well-maintained electrical system enhances the value of the property. Prospective tenants or buyers are more likely to be attracted to a building that is known to be safe and efficient. Removing abandoned cables contributes to a positive image and can increase the property's market value. Thirdly, a clean and organized cable infrastructure simplifies future upgrades and modifications. When new cables need to be installed or existing cables need to be rerouted, a clear and uncluttered cable pathway makes the job much easier and faster. This can save time and money in the long run. Fourthly, regular removal of abandoned cables promotes a culture of safety within the organization. Employees and contractors are more likely to take safety seriously when they see that the company is committed to maintaining a safe and compliant workplace. Furthermore, consider the environmental impact of abandoned cables. Many types of cable contain materials that can be harmful to the environment if not disposed of properly. By recycling cables, you can reduce the amount of waste that goes to landfills and conserve valuable resources. Recycling also reduces the need to extract new raw materials, which can have significant environmental consequences. When choosing an electrical contractor to remove abandoned cables, it is important to select a company that is licensed, insured, and experienced in this type of work. Ask for references and check online reviews to ensure that the contractor has a good reputation. It is also important to verify that the contractor is familiar with the NEC and other applicable codes and regulations. A qualified contractor will be able to assess the situation, develop a plan for removing the abandoned cables, and perform the work safely and efficiently. They will also be able to properly dispose of the removed cables in accordance with all applicable regulations. In addition to removing abandoned cables, consider implementing a cable management system to prevent future cable abandonment. A cable management system can help you keep track of your cables, identify them easily, and organize them in a neat and orderly fashion. There are many different types of cable management systems available, ranging from simple Velcro straps to sophisticated cable trays and labeling systems. Choose a system that is appropriate for your needs and budget. By taking these steps, you can ensure that your building's electrical system is safe, efficient, and compliant with the National Electrical Code. You will also be protecting your property, your employees, and the environment. Adhering to NEC Section 300.3c is not just a matter of compliance, it is a matter of responsible facility management. Let us now address some common misconceptions about abandoned cable removal. One common misconception is that abandoned cables are harmless because they are not connected to any power source. While it is true that abandoned cables do not pose a direct electrical shock hazard, they can still contribute to fire hazards, impede airflow, and create confusion during troubleshooting. Another misconception is that removing abandoned cables is too expensive. While there is certainly a cost associated with removing abandoned cables, the cost is often outweighed by the benefits of improved safety, reduced liability, and enhanced property value. Furthermore, the cost of removing abandoned cables can be minimized by planning the removal carefully and using efficient techniques. A third misconception is that it is not necessary to remove abandoned cables if they are located in a hidden or inaccessible area. However, even cables located in hidden areas can pose a fire hazard and impede airflow. Furthermore, these cables can become a nuisance when future renovations or modifications are required. Therefore, it is important to remove all abandoned cables, regardless of their location. A fourth misconception is that it is acceptable to simply cut off the ends of abandoned cables and leave the rest of the cable in place. This practice is not only a violation of the NEC but also creates a potential hazard. The cut ends of the cables can become frayed and expose conductive materials, which could create a short circuit or other electrical problem. Furthermore, leaving the cable in place still contributes to the fire load and impedes airflow. A fifth misconception is that only electrical contractors are qualified to remove abandoned cables. While it is true that electrical contractors have the training and experience necessary to remove abandoned cables safely and efficiently, other qualified personnel, such as IT technicians or maintenance staff, may also be able to perform this task, provided that they have received proper training and are familiar with the NEC and other applicable codes and regulations. However, it is important to emphasize that safety should always be the top priority. If you are not comfortable performing the task yourself, it is best to hire a qualified electrical contractor. Finally, it's a misconception that only older buildings have issues with abandoned cables. Even newer buildings can accumulate abandoned cables over time as technology evolves and systems are upgraded. Regular inspections and maintenance are essential to identify and remove abandoned cables in all types of buildings. To summarize, abandoned cables, as addressed by NEC Section 300.3c, present significant risks if left unmanaged. The requirement for their removal isn't merely a suggestion, but a critical component of ensuring electrical safety and efficiency. Common misbeliefs often downplay these risks, assuming abandoned cables are harmless due to their disconnected state or considering removal an unnecessary expense. However, the long-term benefits of compliance, including reduced fire hazards, improved worker safety, easier maintenance, and increased property value, far outweigh the costs. Regular inspections, proper cable management, and adherence to NEC guidelines are essential for all buildings, regardless of age, to prevent the accumulation of abandoned cables and maintain a safe and efficient electrical infrastructure. Remember, proactive measures are always more cost-effective and safer than reactive solutions when it comes to electrical systems. In conclusion, understanding and implementing NEC Section 300.3c regarding abandoned cable removal is not just about adhering to a regulation, it's about fostering a culture of safety, efficiency, and responsible facility management.